All right. Welcome back, everybody. We're thrilled to be back online here with a nice showing of people and some good interest. I'm thrilled to have our guest tonight, Mike Burgess, who's got a lot of experience in multi-unit investing, very successful, does a lot of business in Dartmouth, which seems to be a really hot spot right now. Mike's been doing this for several years, and he has experience in quite a diversity of things. And really, I've been wanting to have him on this call. I know Jenna was a little upset with me that I snagged him first because I know she wants to get him on. She's gonna be hitting you up next, Mike, to go on her. Yeah. She's like, you asked him first. You're gonna be. She's gonna be inviting you on her podcast coming up. Maybe I stole their thunder here, but I might get in trouble.
Oh, that sounds exciting. Love to.
So, Mike, why don't you take a minute and basically tell us a bit about your background and how you got started in real estate?
Sure. So I've been dabbling in real estate initially on a part-time basis in my early 20s. When my dad was alive, he was a salesman in the day, and evenings and weekends he had a couple 6-unit buildings in Windsor, and then he had a few more over the years, had duplexes, 4 units and whatnot in the city in Dartmouth. So he was really my first coach and mentor. When I was 22, he helped me get set up in a 4-unit building on Alva Lake Road. So I had bought that, did some renovations and refinanced it, and basically, that was over earlier years. I worked full time for Coca-Cola, for Hostess, Frito-Lay, different suppliers in retail stores and whatnot. So, and then the apartment business was a part-time thing. So about 15 years ago, I had moved back from Montreal and was going through a divorce, and said, okay, well, what can I do that I can be available for my 2 kids, which at the time they were 10 and 12. So I wanted to be able to commute back and forth to Montreal to be able to see them. So, I'd had a couple apartment buildings at the time then. I said, okay, well, maybe I can rev that up a little bit and do it a little bit more full time. So that's exactly what I did. Just sort of kept adding to the portfolio in multi-unit buildings over the years. I partnered with a friend of mine on a couple properties. He was an electrician by trade, so we were kind of a good mix. The days that we were partnered up in those, he had turned into more of an industrial focus in his electrical business, and wanted to focus on that. So I had bought him out. It's been an interesting ride. I get a lot of pleasure out of really acquiring a property and then say how can I add value to it, and with that focus, sort of putting a forced appreciation on top of the natural appreciation. It's kind of in my strategy in building my portfolio that hopefully leaves a legacy for my kids and now grandkids.
That's awesome. That's I love hearing that, especially that you were able to you had your dad there kind of maybe giving you a little bit of a push to get into something that at that age must have been scary as anything, looking up against something like that. Not just buying your first home, but buying something to rent out to people who are probably older than you. I would assume.
Yeah. You hit the nail right on the head. I can remember being literally 22 years old, and it was the end of the month, and going to collect rent. I had as I said, my first building was a 4-unit. And at the time I was a kid. I lived at home and had an apartment building. So I was pounding on the door collecting rent from these blue collar 40, 50-year-old guys. So it really was stepping outside the box in a comfort zone when I think back in those days initially. But it was well worth it. I think you mentioned about being uncomfortable. Back in the days, like my dad had the experience, and I think it's what I've only learned over the last few years, when a lot of people will suggest get a coach, get a mentor. If you're going to fast track your success, take advantage of the success that other people have had and learn from them. And I guess in hindsight, I guess that's kind of what I did from him. So
That's awesome. I mean, so many people who get into this think, I think I'll learn more if I learn how to do it myself and kind of go out there and make a bunch of mistakes. But regardless of what you do, you will make mistakes along the way. But having that mentor, I learned that lesson way down the road as well. Jenna and I bought our first few rental properties, and we're like, we got this, we got this all figured out. And then we got burned a few times, and then we started talking to people and networking and doing things like this. And and just over the past 3 years, I mean, our business has exploded because of surrounding ourselves with people, not just like yourself. So that's great advice for our listeners is, get a mentor. Amanda and I we have a coach as well under the real estate stuff, and I try to learn as much as I possibly can under the investing side of stuff. So yeah, awesome.
And this is a great example of a forum where meetups and I know myself, we've connected on a monthly basis as local landlords. We've been doing that since basically 2009. So the properties that are in Pinecrest, Brule Street, we had some really interesting days back in those days with the crime on top of the poverty, the mental illness and the mental illness in some of the community members, and drug circles. So there's a lot of stuff really fighting the success of the community. And I guess I could contribute what I believe is a huge step forward in today's snapshot of things. There was support from Peter Kelly was mayor at the time, and I can remember him coming over and doing a walk on the street and literally picking up garbage as he was doing that walk and setting an example. And then within a couple weeks of that, we all of a sudden had garbage cans on every other lamppost. And bylaw would be around sort of enforcing derelict things, which really helped raise the bar. And so I would love to say I was really strategic. I came in and bought all these properties on Pinecrest and Brule, and it was my master plan for things to double and triple in value. But the reality is a lot of it was just good luck, sort of blind faith that all these forces were together. And United Way was another driving force that helped to really be support amongst the community. Most of my portfolio is in North End Dartmouth, and years ago it had got a negative stigmatism within the media, and ironically, we don't necessarily see North End Dartmouth highlighted for that any more than Spryfield or Sackville, or even Bedford, or different parts of Halifax. Unfortunately, bad things happen everywhere, So that's really my focus had sort of been very familiar with the neighborhood and what was going on. And as a result of that, now when I'll go to rent an apartment, um, I have a list of people that are just um, are referred from existing tenants. Even previous tenants will come back and say, "Mike, do you have anything available?" So it's been probably 2 or 3 years since I've even advertised for an apartment.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I mean, not to, I have to take a step back and say I agree there's some luck, but I follow the omen. The harder the work, the harder you work, the more luck you tend to have. And I know for a fact, reading some of the articles that were published about you when you first got started in the paper and stuff, you were a hard worker and you're still a hard worker. So you need to give yourself some kudos for that. You've done an amazing job in North Andover.
Oh, thank you. Um, One, and just sort of throw some other, I think to elaborate on the coaching and whatnot, I'd like to maybe take this opportunity to sort of share with people on the line that, for me, for the last 20-25 years, I've gone to, it seems like any meetup organization, not even necessarily in real estate, um, almost every event or convention, people would throw out one or two books, and they'd say, "What books do you recommend reading?" And one that always stuck out to me was Think and Grow Rich. And for 25 years, I was going to read it, and it's been over the last 2 weeks that I've just finally hunkered down and did go through the whole book. And on your bookshelf.
Yeah, I think it is somewhere here. I've got another one of Dale's here.
Yes.
I think it might be up on the nightstand. Amazing.
And um, it just sort of, for me, it just sort of brought a lot of things full circle. That, oh, that's what this one was talking about in this particular event. All the things that I spent hundreds and thousands of dollars to different trips and events and to attend, and a lot of the things were right there in that book, just sort of illustrating things.
That's awesome that you say that, because I agree with you 100%. I read another book very similar along that lines. It's The Richest Man in Babylon, and these are theories from 100 years ago.
Yes.
And these other books reflect it doesn't necessarily just need to be associated with real estate, but you don't need to rewrite or redesign the wheel. There's a lot of people who are practicing, and you're right. You're hearing these things at seminars from people who will say, "I read this book and this is a great book to read, and I'm going to teach you about it."
Yes.
But I do have to comment that having real life experience in front of you and that coach, I think that's irreplaceable too. Like, you'll learn a lot of theories, but seeing somebody like yourself who's actually put those theories to practice, that's priceless, right?
Well, I've made my fair share of mistakes. I could have done things more efficiently. I could have spent less time in the plow truck and more time, acquiring this property or that property. But that's okay. I mean, I think part of it is enjoy the journey.
Exactly. I sold my plow truck 2 years ago, and I honestly, I love that time in the morning. It allowed me actually time to think and reflect on what was up, because during a big snowstorm, there's not a lot of other things going on. That's kind of a pressing thing. You got to get yourself snowed out. So I kind of enjoyed it. I did kind of realize at a certain point, and Jenna helped me realize that your time is more valuable to be doing other things. Plus, you're always repairing your truck. You're not getting anywhere ahead.
No, it's well, I guess in the apartment business there's and I have to sort of keep my dollar values with 2000 the year 2020. But it was pointed out to me a while ago. There was a few years ago there was a $10 an hour job. The mowing lawns and the vacuuming and that kind of stuff. There was $15 an hour jobs, maybe small repairs, $20 an hour jobs, getting into carpentry and plumbing and electrical, getting into 30, 40, $50 an hour jobs. So it's to find the right people to how you can do it most cost effectively. Um, running any apartment building is there's a lot of similarities to a household budget. That we have X amount coming in. Um, if we can bring more in, that improves our bottom line. We have X amount going out for our expenses. If we can minimize our expenses, then that helps our bottom line and raises it. Um, and and at the end of the day, when the better that bottom line is, that reflects the value of our property and how it positions itself for resale or refinance. So it's not all that complicated. It's just with a little bit of right focus on some of these things.
Exactly. And I do think there's something to be said about, understanding the cost and the what's involved in doing all of those things before you go out and hire a bunch of people to do them. So you understand what you're paying for, you're understanding the job, and you're understanding how to do it right. A lot of people will ask me, do I hire a property manager right away? I say learn from a property manager, but also be hands-on as much as you possibly can, so you can learn what makes a good property manager. Jenna Ross. I mean, sorry.
Awesome. No, you're right.
But yeah, I'm gonna get back on track to my questions because I could just talk all night with you. But I want to try and keep on track here. So, Mike, what type of real estate have you invested in over your career?
So it's been predominantly multi-unit properties, ranging from 5 units, 8 units, 12 units as I said, over the last few years. When I first started, as I said earlier, my first one was a 4-unit. Next one was a triplex. And then after I had acquired those 2, it was time to move out of mom and dad's basement and have my own house. So that acquisition was a bungalow. So when I bought that bungalow, I had.
So let me get this right. You own 2 multi-unit buildings, and you were still living with your parents.
Yes.
I love that. That's awesome. That's fantastic.
I had the right coach.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. I'm not making money if I go and buy myself a house to live in, so I'm going to buy properties that will help me, basically buy my house.
So to build on that, when it was time to buy my house, I did buy a bungalow. I was single at the time, and I got on the phone and I got 3 buddies together, and I said, I'm buying a house. I'm going to have some rooms to rent. Do you want to be a roommate?
Even better.
So on closing day, and I bought the house. We had 3 people moving in, so I took what was the rec room of that house, and that was my bedroom, and rented out these other bedrooms. And then once we got moved in, I took the other half of the basement. It was originally a garage. We kind of modified that, and we built a 1-bedroom apartment in where the garage was. So it really just sort of hammered home how do you add value to a property and make it cash flow and build equity. So in that particular house, I lived there for 2 or 3 years. then I got married. We built a house in Bedford, and lo and behold, I talked my wife at the time into, yes, let's build a basement apartment in that house.
Nice.
So we lived there, and then had moved to Montreal for a while, and then when I, as I said, divorced and came back, sort of revved it up into multi-unit buildings. So, I think the natural progression, if anybody on the call that's looking at starting to get into real estate, push yourself to where your comfort level is, and if that's a single family home or a semi, a triplex, just do it. It will, if you can cash flow and keep things rented and the money coming in and paying the expenses, it will build in value, and you get used to dealing with tenants and solving their problems, because that's really what successful people are problem solvers. As real estate investors, we provide housing. We solve the problem of providing a place for people to live. If we do it right and they're happy, we're able to get a market rent, or slightly just a little bit less than market, and they'll stay long term. Yeah, so just to sort of recap, it's been a combination of smaller properties in the beginning, now into up into 12 and 13 unit buildings, and my natural progression now would be getting to a 50 or 60 unit building that sort of makes more sense from an economies of scale, where there would be a live-in superintendent that and perhaps an assistant that would look after minor repairs and tenant issues, and everything's sort of under one roof.
So I guess that's kind of been your focus now is investing in more things under one roof.
That's been on my bucket list. The reality is, the last few years I haven't really acquired much. I did the most recent one I bought was just a little single family home. Not that I want to get into homes, but it was more the location, because it was smack in between the middle of 2 8-unit apartment buildings that I had. So I just saw that more for the opportunity within 5 to 10 years that for the land value.
Awesome. So with that being said, what, over the years of investing, what have been some of your more profitable acquisitions? It sounds like the first 3 were amazing. I don't know what, if anything, you were paying. You're probably making money with your first house by the amount of people you had.
Oh, yes.
So you were living for free, and then probably some. Can you talk to my wife so you can let me get her to build some more apartments in my house?
We have to keep Mama happy, right? So we have to be realistic here too.
This is true.
What I'm up against now is, Mike, all the stuff that you have in the garage here, that's apartment stuff. You have to get that out of there. So, it's a give and take. We have to be somewhat reasonable. So she's not in the room and not on this call. I can speak freely. Yeah, I mean, to have your own home and that separation, I think we get to the stage in our lives that there's life before kids and with kids, and it's very different. So it's we alluded on balance and within life, and it's a tough. The little bit that we've talked, I can appreciate. Yourself and Jenna are raising a family, and that takes a commitment, and you have to be able to be there for them, enjoy that journey. That time flies so quickly. My kids now are 26 and 28, so they're, they don't need me so much, and that's how I've been able to put in literally the 12-hour days, for a while, for quite a while actually, and then I've scaled it back. So my youngest, my daughter just had a baby in March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, and she's in New Brunswick. So we're waiting for the border to open up in New Brunswick so we can go and see her. We thank God for FaceTime and Zoom to be able to get those special moments. But we can see in over the course of just a little over 2 months how much she's grown, and those things are important. So it's how do you do that balance? Because the reality is, as real estate investors, our life is out of balance. If we're going to be successful, we have a huge focus on really creating that vision of what we want, the empire that we want to build, and that takes above average efforts. So the typical government employee will go into work, I assume, at 9 o'clock and leave at 4 or 5 or whatever, and that's it for their day. They're done. They're off at the golf. They understand what golf is, and they do it. Um, and and the reality is, over the course of their life, they're probably more balanced. But we're everybody on this call could be watching The Big Bang Theory or whatever's on TV, if there's anything left on TV that hasn't been on Netflix that everybody hasn't watched. I don't know. But I believe that successful real estate investors, we say, we're investing an hour now to be paid for 10 and 100 hours in the future. Whereas the typical employee is working an hour, they're getting paid an hour, and if they don't come in next week, their paycheck is very soon going to come to an end. Whereas we're investing our time now, we're building an empire that's going to continue on, and it provides us that legacy for our families, ourselves, and it provides options for us to be able to do what we want with our lives. For me, we have this bucket list of things that we want to do, and since I was a teenager, I wanted a Corvette. Well, this time last year, I went out and I bought an old Corvette. So check. It's because of what we invest, it brings those options. Because if not, we could have a comfortable salaried position that 5 o'clock we close the door, and we don't worry about if there's a flood or a fire or a fight or whatever happens that we have to deal with. So I believe it's going that little extra mile to invest in something for ourselves.
That's perfect. Like it just resonates to everything that I've been feeling and thinking for my own business, especially during these times. I have friends that work for government, regular jobs, and right now they're struggling. I know some very well-off people that are struggling because they become dependent on, like you said, the hour in, the hour paid back. Whereas investors in real estate or other types of passive income, we may feel a little bit of a hiccup during times like these, but we're going to be fine. We're still building, we're still creating that future for ourselves that we will be rewarded, and we don't have to carry that stress. It's unfortunate because a lot of people feel like they can take that risk because they see real estate or investing in a big, huge risk. But I mean, all we have to do is look into some historical, historical examples of real estate, and it always goes up.
It's, I absolutely agree with that. I do have, I have one commercial property. Everything else is residential. And, I sort of look at the commercial market, and things are sort of up in the air, what's going to happen in that industry. And it really is, I believe it's really a hit and miss that, a lot of people have gotten used to work from home. Will some of these companies say, hey, we don't need these big offices. We can, perhaps we can explore the option of, do we get our workforce to work from home? And we have a little less commercial rent that we have to pay for. So it's really up in the air. So students, my stepdaughter's at Dalhousie, so we've heard that Dalhousie's going online.
Yep.
For the first semester. So in her particular situation, her boyfriend was starting medical residency in Toronto. So now that she's on her law degree is online, she's going to Toronto. So there's one how things sort of butterfly effect, how things roll. One thing affects another. So they're going to be subletting their apartment. That's one less vacant. That's one more vacancy or availability in South End of Halifax. So it's kind of interesting to see how this is going to all play out. It really there's some things that we don't necessarily have any control over. But if we look at it and say, okay, well, if this happens, where's the opportunity going to be? And how can we as investors position ourselves in front of that opportunity? So yeah, just a thought.
No, it's making me kind of expand my thoughts on the whole thing, because I did read earlier this week with your comment about that, was that the biggest company in the world, Google, is going to be keeping a lot of their workforce home. Are you still there, Mike? You look like you froze up. Are we all frozen up here?
No, I can hear you and see you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
So we just lost Mike there for a second.
Yeah, maybe give him a minute.
Sure. Oh, he's coming back in. I just see him coming in the room. So yeah, like I was saying, guys, I was reading in the paper, I think it was earlier this week, that, the largest company, in the world, Google, one of the largest, if not the, is going to be keeping the majority of their workforce at home after this. So Mike's statement about that is exactly true now. And how does that impact, how does that impact us as investors? Who's going to lead into that we missed that? We see Mike coming back in here anywhere, Amanda? Am I by myself now?
Sorry, no, I'm here. I couldn't see the mute button. Yeah, no, I don't see him. I saw him attempt to rejoin. So I'm sure he'll pop back in here in a second.
Sorry about that, guys. Technical difficulties. There's Mr. Burgess. You're still muted, Mike. There you are.
You hear me now?
Much
Sorry about that. My laptop wasn't charging, and it just
technical difficulties.
so for phones, right?
Yeah, thank God for phones. So what I was saying while you were gone, Mike, is that basically, Google had announced earlier this week that the majority of their staff who is not required to be in offices will have the option, and maybe more than just the option, of staying home to work. So one of the largest companies in the world is already actioning that, and a lot more are going to follow suit. Even law offices. When I interviewed Mark Charles, I asked him, like, what's your new world going to look like? He was like, well, we're going to be able to do a lot more stuff remotely. Like before, we needed to meet in person, old school, have to sign with the red ink or blue ink or whatever it might be. But now they're looking into the future and saying, well, why do we need these big expensive offices and this big overhead? So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens over the next 6 to 12 months in that side of things, and how it will impact our investors. You were kind of alluding into that, and right when you. Right.
How cool it would have been to invest in Zoom like 4 months ago.
Oh my gosh! I think I'd be taking this call from Barbados or this.
Yeah. but it makes us so much more. I've attended a couple seminars based out of Toronto. I saved a flight of airfare, accommodations, and did the 4 hour or whatever the event was from home.
Yeah.
And got it just and from the event coordinator, it was like 10% of the cost for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Efficiencies.
Yes.
So many.
So, so I kind of look at that and say, okay, is there going to be more need for people more of a demand for people to move from a 1-bedroom to a 2-bedroom? Are they going to, a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom, looking for one room for a dedicated office?
Ah, I never thought of that. That's really good thinking, because a lot of people are. I mean, I was on a web conference, an international one last week, with a guy who's pretty high up there, and he was taking it from his bedroom, and I could see his unmade bed in the background. Oh no! Did your phone die?
We're between Shobin and I. We're probably doing so. She'll connect with her brothers, one brother's in Dartmouth, one brother's in San Diego, and her mother's across the city. So they'll have a nightly Zoom call now, to be support for her mother. And, so she's got her whole family, all there right in front of her. They've almost coached her how to log on with her iPhone, but it's still a work in progress.
I had to buy my parents a laptop. I had to buy them an iPad, and I need to call them on the telephone to reteach them how to do it every time. So I feel your pain there.
Well, my mother was on Messenger like a couple of years before I could figure it out. So
wow.
She's doing okay.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Mike, so if you were to give some advice to some of our investors who are thinking of making that transition from the single family home, which a lot of people feel like, oh, that's my safe spot, that's where I'm comfortable with, but understanding that there's more potential growth, there's more efficiencies to be realized in the multi-unit investing, what would you give those guys as a little bit of advice transitioning or thinking about transitioning into those?
Well, it depends on how, different people are. There's so many different strategies in real estate. So I don't know if there's necessarily a one size fits all.
No, you're breaking up.
The reality is maybe just do whether. Okay. Am I doing okay now?
Yeah, that's a little bit better there. You're freezing up a little bit. I don't know if it's bad reception on your phone or not. It seems to be a little bit more stable there now. There you are.
I'm gonna take it in another room because I'm at the end of the house here.
Okay.
Okay, so once
And we get to get the tour of your house while we're at it. That's awesome.
Ta-da.
Great.
So we getting pretty good reception here now?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so depending on what a person's comfort level is, you know, one strategy that worked for me that I described earlier was building those basement apartments. So, you know, from that single family home, create an income stream from your home if that works for you. Within the center plan in Halifax, the zoning's finally opened up to allow that. And within Peninsula Halifax and a good portion of Dartmouth, that's going to be legal to be able to do that. So there's these 50-year-old houses that some of them don't have a finished basement, and they're really a blank canvas. So if you can acquire one of those bungalows at a decent price, go in and you know, depending on what if you're starting out and want to manage expenses and you have a little bit of construction experience, you know, maybe you do some of the work yourself. The reality, the basic rule of thumb is that, you know, 50% is labor and 50% is material. So if you can put in some sweat equity in the beginning and get started, that might be one option to start as you know, turn one unit into two, and that's raised the value of that property. It creates an income stream. It helps you get used to being the landlord. The next evolution would be, you know, getting into a semi or a 4-unit or a triplex. And I'll share with what took me probably 20 years to learn. Passing this on, hopefully it can be some, you know, cut those 20 years off of somebody else's business life on this call. I had partnered with a friend of mine and we bought a 4-unit building on Albert Lake Road. Things were going pretty good. So within about 6 months later, we bought a 13-unit building on Spring Hill. We went out and we hired a snowplow operator, and at the time he was charging us $800 to plow the snow for the year for each of those 2 properties. So it was costing us $800 to plow a 4-unit property. It was costing us $800 to plow a 13-unit property. So in other words, $200 a unit for one property, and I'm not even going to quickly do the math, but like $80 or whatever for the other, or 70.
Is that when you bought your plow truck?
After year 3, we had burned through 3 guys that gave us excuses of why they couldn't storm. We said, this is crazy. We're having our own plow truck. If we're going to get yelled at, it's because we have some control over us not showing up ourselves. We just did. So that sort of hits home about the economies of scale. The more, and where I am in sort of the more units you can get under one roof, the more efficient and effective, cost effective, the quicker you get to that sweet spot of things working. So that's, you know, I've, you know, within Pinecrest and Brule, I have 312, is it 312? 2 12 units, 3 8s, a 5, a 6 unit, and they're all within like they all neighbor on each other. So, you know, I'm dealing with multiple roofs, but because of geographically they're all there, it's very easy to do maintenance and operations on those surrounding properties. So in some respects, they're similar to, you know, a 50 unit.
Yeah.
So to your point, what would I suggest people to do is just, you know, if you're working full time, you're on this call for a reason, because you want more for yourself and your family, and you want to be able to be rewarded at the end of the day or at the end of the week or the month, whatever. take action and, do your due diligence, get into a property that, you want it to cash flow, be wary of, what area are you buying? So a lot of my focus, a good portion of my portfolio is in the Pinecrest Rural Street area, and there was, and it was a rough neighborhood, and with that comes a lot of challenges. So I don't know if I would have recommended for somebody to start out in Pinecrest and Brule 15 years ago. I had a little bit of experience with the comfort level of the tenants and basic knowledge of what it takes to keep things fixed, keep things paid for the most part, keep tenants satisfied, and keep things rented. So, it's a series of steps. If you start off with that comfort level and just work your way up.
Awesome. That's great
Yeah.
advice. That's fantastic. And what kind of metrics do you use when you're evaluating a multi-unit investment? I know you had mentioned finding a property that perhaps you can add value to, which I'm always a big proponent. I don't want to buy somebody else's finished job because they're the ones reaping the benefit. So what are some of the metrics that you might use?
So I would, I guess for the most part, I would do completely the opposite of what I did when I bought my property in Jacksonville. I bought a turnkey property that was probably retail, or even in fact a little bit higher than retail that I paid for. It was in a war-torn area. It, I didn't do my due diligence. So make sure you don't make those mistakes. I carried that property, and it was a money pit for the 5 years that I had it. I should have sold it 4 years before I did. So when I'm looking at a property, the dues, ideally I want to be able to acquire it for below market value. Most of my properties have, when I've acquired them, there was deferred maintenance that, things hadn't been done. They needed to be fixed. So with that condition, in that scenario, I was able to obviously buy it at, a little bit more of a discounted rate. In some cases, I was fortunate to be able to take a vendor take back, which sort of helped with financing. Another case, there was the vendor had financing arranged for, it was a year or 2 years from his lawyer. So it was really being, so it's creative financing. Ideally, if you can get into it for no money down, or some type of creative financing that, whether it's through lines of credit to initially purchase it and then add value and then refinance it, haul some more money out to be able to move on to the next one. Those are some strategies. As I said, there's literally binders of different strategies that will work. And you and I could probably put our heads together relatively easy and come up with 50 strategies. And any one of those 50 strategies could work, or they could fail. It depends on what effort and focus you put on any particular strategy that you decide to do.
That's awesome. I feel like these are the things that excite me so much about real estate and investing, is that there's not one deal that is the same from another deal. You don't get a chance to say there's some monotony happening in real estate investing, because there's so many different strategies that you can look at. You can make a deal work using one strategy, but completely fail using an alternative strategy. It's almost like playing chess. You've got to use your mind, and you've got to make some strategic moves. And, we just put on under agreement 7 units in Dartmouth, and we had a specific strategy. It was over 2 buildings, so we have a specific strategy for each building, and it was exciting, just like the last investment that we had done, because it was completely different, still along the same end result of creating more value underneath something that's had significant deferred maintenance, to put it lightly. But I see that as a huge opportunity when a lot of other people will run, as long as you do your due diligence properly and you have the right people surrounding you. Like, like you had said earlier, having the right people to evaluate that and look at that and say, it's not as bad as what it looks like. These things are solid. This is the stuff that you need to do to this, but that's not expensive stuff. It's the risk, I guess, when people are inexperienced in going into a place, and I want it to be as horrible as possible. Well, to a certain extent, if we have to tear down the foundation and rebuild the whole thing, and the value of the land is, not quite up there yet, then you can get into a risky situation. But I just love it keeps me passionate about this every single morning when I wake up, is because it's not going to be the same as yesterday. It's not. There's going to be 1,000,001 different new things happen in that day. And I love that you say there's 1,000 strategies, because there's 1,000+ strategies. It's commingling different strategies in together that may work in creative financing and vendor take back mortgages and leveraging different banks and private lenders. There's so many different things. Could go on all night.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you think with real estate, I mean, you've had some experience over several years and you've seen some historical trends happen. Do you think real estate's going to go up, remain flat in value? What do you think that's going to happen with real estate?
I'd love to have a crystal ball right now. I think obviously, as we alluded to earlier, that commercial is going to be, there's going to be some situations that they're going to take some hits. I was talking to somebody today. They're saying how some of the new construction, where they were originally had a retail component on the ground level and then residential above, that now some of these builders today are very quickly responding to amending a portion of what was originally allocated for retail or commercial to residential. So, I believe that Halifax is, I think we're blessed and fortunate that, we have a good percentage of our population that's employed by federal and provincial governments. So we're relatively stable from that perspective. There's other markets that have the Detroits of the world, where when the car industry collapsed, things really tanked in those markets. We don't have the volatility of the large spikes of Toronto and Vancouver, where, things can appreciate, 50 or 100%. And then all of a sudden, there's a market correction and then just a downward slide for a while. So I would like to believe that we're pretty stable in the Halifax market. We look at that from the residential perspective, that we had a low vacancy before COVID. I believe that that trend hopefully is going to continue. We see a lot of, when the province was evaluating what was essential services, the construction carried on. So it's sort of reading between those lines that, we can read into that housing is important, and it's a necessity. you know, a lot of people are really struggling with affordable housing. That's a huge issue, and that could be, you know, another entire evening's call. So I think Halifax is on the radar for investors throughout Canada. We're seen as a very favorable market from conversations I'm having with different people. You know, it sort of I think dates back to the announcement of the shipbuilding. You know, whether they've actually helped us or not, I'm sort of not sure about that. But I think it started to create a lot of hype, and we've had the population growth sort of move in, you know, sort of since, you know, after that. I think we're doing okay. I think we'll, you know, are we gonna, you know, there might be some markets that take some portions of real estate that have a little bit of correction, you know, in the as I said, in the commercial and the retail. But I think residential, I think we're looking pretty good.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. It was interesting. You and I were on, well, you invited me to one of those national calls last week, actually international, because there are some people from the US as well. And it was very interesting to hear what's happening in all the different markets. And I was on an international one that I was a panelist on. And I had so many people contact me after I was a panelist on there, because I talked a little bit about a few of the deals that we had been working on in my own portfolio and then for clients, and getting the attention of people outside of not just Nova Scotia, like all over into the US. I had, you know, the guy from San Diego email me. He's like, you need to tell me a little bit more about what's happening there. Because you can imagine in California, you know, when they talk about cash flow and stuff, they've got a huge uphill battle that we don't witness as much here. Like, we're talking, we want to see, you know, $300, $400, $500 cash flow on top of expenses a door. That's a lot unheard of in a lot of other investment places around the world. And I see Halifax as being so diversified. When you mentioned Detroit, you know, that was a one pony town. They had the automotive industry, and when we had the collapse of the economy and the automotive industry was the first to take the big hit, Detroit it imploded on itself. I was watching videos on CNN of, you know, municipal parks having grass growing up 6 feet. We're kind of diversified enough here in Halifax and Nova Scotia that we have a huge education. We have, you know, all of the universities. Secondary education is huge. The military is huge. Technology is huge. And right now, development is huge. So all of the outside investors coming in, looking and seeing the growth and the diversification, which also, like, diversification to me, that's a risk lower. That brings your risk down when you have diversification, whether you're investing or whether it's your economy as a whole. So I'm betting big on Halifax. Like, I have clients, because I do some residential stuff as well, and I have people who will come by, and Amanda and I sold an oceanfront home with a beautiful 2-story boathouse under $500,000 on the eastern shore of Nova Scotia. And he was telling his coworkers in Washington all about this. And then the next thing you know, we have all kinds of other people looking, wow, you can really buy that type of property on the ocean. Where in other areas, you're talking millions upon millions of dollars to do the same. So we have a lot of room to go up. Like, the natural beauty that we have surrounding this province is, I mean, you drive a half an hour in any direction, you're going to hit water.
Yes. Yeah. That's a great point. When we moved to Montreal, I don't think we realized how we missed that ocean.
Yeah, it's in our blood here, it's in our skin. I'm 10 minutes from Lawrencetown Beach, and that's where I think Jenna's actually taking the call with earbuds in her ear right now, walking the dog on Lawrencetown Beach with our daughter. Like, people take that for granted, what we can actually do living here in Nova Scotia. And the other big thing right now is immigration. Like, immigration's up 30% in Nova Scotia right now. People are moving and clamoring to the city. I see it a lot in industry, but also through Jenna and through the people who are looking for places to live. I don't use the word crisis lightly, but we are in a bit of a housing crisis right now. We do not have enough roofs to put over people's heads, whether it be rentals, whether it be people buying a home. People are in tough situations trying to get product here. Jenna has a waiting list. Like you said, you don't even advertise. I mean, you have people, you have a list of people. I know that has a lot to do with how you've built your business, but that's also the reality of the vacancy. If we were to take real calculations right now, I think we'd be in the negative on vacancy. I don't think we're 1 or 0.9% anymore. I think it's negative. I think there's more people looking for places than there are places to actually live. So
yeah, no, I believe that.
Yeah. I got to get through these questions because I don't want to hog all your time. I want to let some people ask some questions. I got a few bings while we were sitting here, so I know we got some questions to address. But Mike, tell us, what is one of your favorite things about being a real estate investor?
Favorite things. Great question. I've over the years, I've gotten a lot of satisfaction in sort of turning that ugliest property on the street into somewhere where, the look on people's faces when they came in and they saw how the hardwood floor was refinished and sort of mirror-like finish that you could sort of almost see yourself in it. And they would come in and have pride in ownership and have nice curtain and furnishings and pride in that. Are we still there?
Yeah, you're still here in
okay. Okay, sorry. I had a call that was coming in. I didn't know if it overrode us. So that's okay.
Yep,
great.
Again.
So there's sort of a lot of it. I guess my biggest satisfaction is being able to help people. I've been blessed in being able to come across people that needed a break, and sometimes I've gone out on a limb, quite oftentimes, and given them a chance, and they've lived up to that, and that's really been rewarding. It to be able to help people in their lives. I think after I give that some thought, that I think that's probably the biggest satisfaction. And then a second or third would be to be able to pay the bills at the same time.
It's so awesome that you say that, and you put it that way. Like your favorite part is being able to provide something, and then your second is to receive something. That's awesome. I respect you a lot for that. That's great.
Well, I think that's what I've learned is if we can help and serve people, then hopefully the money will come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. If you could send an email back 25 years right now and give your 25-year younger self some advice, what would that be?
I would have said go bigger, faster. There was a time that there was a 90-unit building in Cole Harbour that I'd contemplated, and it was I can't remember the specifics, but it was like a little over $1 million, and that was just such an overwhelming amount of money. It's like, how could I do that? And even now, I don't know how I could have done it, but I do know, from experience and now from reading in the Think and Grow Rich book, things come to us when we're positioned, when we have our mindset of determination, perseverance, commitment. There's ways to make things happen, and we don't always know what the answer is. But if we're in the right mindset, that answer will come, or those answers will come.
That's great. You taught me an equation, actually.
Is that right?
You did. One of the first times we got this, I had the pleasure of sitting down and chatting with you. You told me about the 3 equation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you want to share it with our listeners.
Well, that was from Steph and I, and I've got to be careful not to pronounce his name wrong. Ierno.
Okay.
And unfortunately, he recently passed away. This is like a 33-year-old investor from out west. I had bought a couple of his books, but it was basically the 3 pillars of a deal: money, people, and the deal, or the financing. So, if you have the deal, and if you have 2 of those 3 pillars, the third one will come. So, in other words, if you have a property, it's at a smoking deal, and you have the financing, you'll find the power team very quickly. Or if you have the power team and it's just,
And the deal, then
yeah. If you only have one of the components, it's a little bit more of an uphill battle. But if you've got 2 of them hammered home, the third one will come.
Awesome.
If you put out on this call that you've got a property at 50% value, how many people are going to for sale, and they've got 60 seconds to respond? How many hands are you going to see waving here?
That's right.
I'm in, I'll take it.
Yeah, I'm in. Do you have one of those deals, Mike?
No. You're the agent, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's awesome, Mike. I love talking to you. I love listening to you. I like getting these questions answered, but I'm going to turn some over now to our guests, to our participants here. See if I can open this up here a little bit. Let's see here. What are 3 to 5 quick snapshot items you look at to decide whether or not you will invest in a property? That's from Luciano.
So I guess the first one that would sort of appeal to me is what, can I get it below value? So if I pull the trigger on the deal and buy it, has it increased my net worth? So that's one of the biggest things. Second would be, what can I do to add value to it? So create even more. Another one I would look at is what kind of area is it in? So, to my Jacksonville property, am I going to have to buy the third third air conditioner to be able to keep the property operating? So in other words, crime rate can be a key component. What's going on in the market? Is it are we high unemployment, and what's happening to the population? Are we having a top population growth or decline? So in our Halifax market, we're pretty good now. 15 years ago, we weren't so attractive. So that's that's some of the things that sort of come to mind.
Okay, great. We have another one in from Ridge. Love that you've established yourself in North End Dartmouth. What systems can you put in place to not get burned as an investor in an area that has been known as, potentially a stigmatic area, I guess, to put it? or previously stigmatic area, I guess.
So I'll answer that in the respect of sort of some of the things that I did. You know, I heavily invested time and relationships. So North End Dartmouth was one of the first. It was the first neighborhood or community of HRM that started off with community police officers. So we had Chris Freese, and then second, I knew Chris a little bit, and replaced when Chris retired, Randy Wood had taken over. And basically they were to, you know, we built those relationships. We talked, you know, at least probably on a weekly basis minimum, on sort of sharing information of what was going on in the neighborhood. And, you know, oftentimes the relationships with other landlords prior to, I think the generation prior to myself and my counterparts, I don't think the landlords communicated with each other. I speculate that they looked at themselves as competitors, whereas I think we had realized that we were in a tough neighborhood and there was a lot of bad stuff going on, and we worked together and we communicated. So if there was somebody that moved into an apartment, didn't pay rent, and sort of was a professional tenant, lived there for 2 or 3 or whatever months free, and then was finally evicted, we kind of talked amongst each other, and I kind of ran them out of North End Dartmouth, because we shared who we were burnt by, and our neighbors didn't make the same mistakes. I think prior to our generation, they didn't do that. And it was evident in the fact that people would move out of one apartment and literally move across the street, and they'd park their freeloading selves there for a few months, and then move back to a little bit up the street and do the same thing. You know, so it's crazy. You know, so just talking to people and the relationships, that's been huge for me.
That's such a great point, because if you look at it, I mean, you guys as investors in larger multi-units, you're after the same goal, but not necessarily the same, you're not providing the same product. There's no reason why we should work against each other. It's such a small community. I mean, even Jenna, as her business grows, she's able to, you know, kind of do the same thing for property managers, right? Like if she gets burned in one of her properties, she's more than glad. In fact, she tries harder to share that information, because it only serves to benefit all of us in the end. If you can save a landlord from, you know, that gentleman in Cole Harbor, had he been notified, I'm sure everybody on the call is aware of what happened there. He was out, you know, tens of thousands of dollars in rent and repairs. Had he had a heads up from somebody, or done a little bit more due diligence and contacted and had some open people in there, could have been completely avoided, which then would have completely avoided, you know, the resources that had to be employed in order to fix that situation, which, you know, that guy will never be whole again. You probably never want to invest again or have a rental property, but it could have been avoided. And you guys took this, you know, you said you started in 2009.
Pinecrest was 2004.
2004. So you started that trend really early on in creating kind of a group that could help each other build your businesses. That's great.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. So I bought first in 2004, but we started to meet as a group, and there would be at one point we had like 35 different companies or property managers, or, you know, including Hamburg and Oxford and, you know, the Transglobe at the time. So, you know, there was a few mom and pops that, you know, weren't sort of in the loop, but like I say, if somebody burnt one of us, we were very happy to share.
Yeah. Because it only comes back around to you. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was, so and most of us on the call would know that, if you're renting to somebody and you're looking for a recommendation, if you're calling their existing landlord, you kind of take that with a grain of salt. Some of them may be very motivated for them to move from their property. So, if you're talking to, if you can get through to a second or third or fourth previous landlord, you're often going to get a more, a realistic answer.
That's great advice. Really great advice. Spend that extra, what is it, hour of your time to save yourself potentially thousands of dollars and hours and hours and hours of, of hardship by spending a little bit more time screening your tenants.
Yeah. And I've for the most part, I've been fortunate that, with a lot of referrals from current tenants, generally, if somebody's a good tenant, they associate with, there's some similarities. So if it's a good tenant that's referred somebody, a relative or a friend, I've generally taken a fair amount of weight on that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's worked out for the most part pretty well.
Great. We have another question from Mahesh. Do you recommend putting 20% down payment and getting the rest from the bank? And what's your tips for looking for properties on a budget? I guess that's what that says, on a budget. So let's address maybe the first question first. The first part of that question, I guess, would be, do you recommend putting 20% down payment and getting the rest from the bank?
If you can, my preferred strategy would be no money down. So when I'll clarify that no money down. No money down in the terms of, it's not necessarily your money. So that could involve a line of credit. In my case, I have a few lines of credit. I have, my mother's helped me out with her line of credit. So back to what I had said earlier, if I can acquire a property that's below market value, one strategy that I've used many times that's worked well for me was to acquire it below market value, do the repairs, and then once it's stabilized, hopefully within 4 to 6 months, then have it reappraised again. And then in the perfect scenario, you've recaptured all of your money and you're free to take those resources onto another one.
I give that same advice to investors just coming into the game. Like, a lot of them think you just need to get that 20% down payment, and it's hard to save 20% down payment for any property. So I guess, the key things to think about is leverage and how you can leverage other people's money, such as the bank or lines of credit.
Absolutely. And the banks so understand the first one is quite often the hardest. And then, once you've acquired that first one, there's going to be a natural appreciation over, 3 to 5 years. There'll be mortgage paid down in those 3 to 5 years. So if you've bought your first property, and within 5 years, there's generally the ability to be able to take some money back out of that first property through a refinance. And then that positions you to, get another one.
Yes.
So my first goal when I was younger, it was sort of working well. I bought this first one, then the second one, then the second one. I said, okay, well, this is cool. I think I'll just, if I can do one a year for 20 years, then I'll be set for life. So I'd got a little off track there for a little while, but did continue.
Yeah.
I get a charger here now, so I don't get dropped.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. So yeah, no, that's great. And I guess the second part of that question, I can answer it too as well, is your tips for looking for the right property for the budget. I mean, if you're within a budget, you still want to try and exercise some of the tips that Mike had given earlier, which is finding the property that's under value that you can increase the value, and that falls into some of the same key strategy points that Mike talked about, which are: you're increasing the value, you can refinance the property down the road, take your money back out. So zero down doesn't necessarily mean that you just don't have any money or leverage in the investment. It just may mean that sometimes you have to put some money up front, and it could be through private lenders. Private lenders, if there's enough spread in the game, will look at certain opportunities, and then you can pull that money back out depending on how long it takes you to renovate that property to bring it up to that. We can talk all night about that strategy. There's some pretty easy metrics to look at those, but if we want to dive in a little bit more, we'll take that. We'll take some questions over email maybe going forward, because it is involved. It's quite simple, but there's some key steps that you need to take. Would you agree on that, Mike?
Absolutely. And getting into those 50 or 100 strategies, another one that comes off the top of my head is to partner with somebody. You may have a rich uncle or a rich somebody who has ability to have a line of credit on their house. There's it's something that I haven't done, but there is another strategy in RSP funds. As long as it's not at arm's length. It's a strategy I haven't done, and I don't know a lot about it, but it is one option.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, Jenna and I do lend out money through our RSP, so we can chat some more about that. We've actually helped investors get started that way by using a third party to lend investors money. So there's a million strategies around that. So, and our RSP is one that not a lot of people know about.